The Scream Kings are in no way responsible for any encounters with the paranormal, extraterrestrial abductions, eldritch insanity, hauntings, curses, hexes, demonic possessions, cryptozoological sightings, or any loss of sleep that results from listening to this podcast.
This is the Scream Kings podcast. I'm Max George.
And I'm Nathaniel Darkish.
This is no podcast. This is really happening.
Speaking of things that are really happening.
I don't know if I like my execution there.
Do you want to take another run at it?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. The Scream Kings are back for a pretty exciting little announcement for us. Our podcast turned 5 years just a few weeks ago. Yes.
We were hoping to have a closer to the actual date release, but, life continues to happen in great quantities.
Holy moly, it's been a wild ride this third quarter of the year. Good grief.
Yeah, let's just say, we're alive and we're podcasting, so, We're not giving up. We're not throwing in the towel.
No, I don't think we will. It's been pretty cool, though, to kind of take a moment and think back. Nathaniel, you and I remember the moment and the place where we decided to do this podcast. I think originally we had talked about doing like a horror blog, right at the kind of end of the blog era. I was at the hotel we used to both work at doing my nightly security shift, and I was outside by the main convention center where we came up with the idea for Scream Kings. We came up with the name, and here we are 5 years later. That's wild.
Yeah, that first episode, came right on the tail of the first It movie coming out. We watched that and then recorded. And yeah, now here we are. We have a whole bunch of episodes under our belt, and had some really cool episodes. We've done some really cool things, met some cool people. It's been wonderful being part of the horror and podcasting communities online, and it's pretty freaking fantastic. And so, we decided, hey, what better thing to do than, have a brief reminiscence of some of our favorite moments, and then chase that down with one of the all-time great horror movies, Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, and whenever people ask for my favorite horror movies, this is definitely top 5. I adore this movie so much.
Yeah, me too. It's truly very, very impressive. But I want to hear some of your favorite moments over these last 5 years for the podcast.
Quick anecdote, real quick. Wow.
Yes.
I actually just rewatched the It movie that we started the podcast with just 2 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
My younger sister came over and we started watching that, and she was horrified, deeply terrified. She doesn't do horror movies very well. But yeah, it brought up all of these cool memories that this was the movie we started with, and here we are, 80 plus some odd episodes later, still doing our thing. I love it. And in large part, we owe it a lot to our listeners who've engaged with us online and bought merchandise, for heaven's sakes, and have come on the show even. We wouldn't be here without you guys. You kind of are the fire that keeps Nathaniel and I going, because life does get crazy. We lose the motivation, but we owe it to our listeners, to use a cliche.
Yes. And, even though life gets crazy, whenever we record an episode, it's a hell of a lot of fun.
Sure is. All right, some of my favorite moments that I can think of. You actually have this written down as one of your own, but I'm going to steal it. The Nauvoo House with Rachel. I think that is our most downloaded, most listened to episode for very good reasons.
It's our most downloaded by so many ridiculous orders of magnitude. It's truly, it makes every other episode seem like we'd have no listeners in comparison. Not to say that we have no listeners, I'm just saying, holy crap, we have so many downloads of that one episode.
Yeah, if you have not listened to it, definitely check it out. It's honestly one of the scariest, like, authentic, spooky story that I've ever heard. I consume a lot of horror content, as do you, Nathaniel, and
of course.
Still thinking about Rachel's experience there at that house gives me the goosebumps.
Yes, and that is episode 25 for anyone who might be flipping through their feed going, wait, what episode is that one? Yeah, so a real-life haunting that was, so fascinating to hear all of the ins and outs. Plus, we get the wonderful Rachel Smith on the podcast, who is just a delightful human being, one of my favorite people. So, just great episode. So, yeah, that one is definitely a high point for us.
Yeah, another few things. I love that the podcast now kind of hosts our annual Halloween horror movie-a-thon, where we start watching horror movies at the crack-ass of dawn and go to the crack-ass of night. I become one with my couch, and it's just a really great day, filled with garbage food and wonderful movies.
Yes, and also garbage movies.
Yeah, we have a hot mix of everything. But other specific episodes that I really, really loved, Charlie Conlon was on the show. He did an episode about sleep paralysis. He has an excellent podcast that everyone should listen to. It's very unnerving, very great. It's called Knowing My Nightmare. And a few others. The Grady Hendrix episode, oh my god. My Best Friend's Exorcism, a movie that will be coming out within a few days.
Yes!
Grady, if you're listening, I love you.
Well, I mean, last time I spoke with him in person, because, that is a thing I've now done, he was like, oh yeah, I'll be back on for sure. So, more Grady Hendrix content to come.
Yeah, Grady, we love you. And I really enjoyed our alien debate that we had with two of my prior coworkers, Kiara and Shannon. Kiara's also been on the show for our little Lush and Seething Hell episode. But that alien debate I just thought was so fun to have two true believers kind of talking about why they believe and being willing to kind of challenge their thoughts. That was really cool. How about you?
I mean, recently we had, definitely a big highlight episode. Just, the episode we just had with Rebecca Klingel and Jamie Flanagan. That was a lot of fun. I mean, it's one of those, like, as I go through our feed, especially like anytime we've had, any guests, I'm just like, oh, but that one's one of my favorites. But that one's one of my favorites. So that one's just, obviously fresh on my mind. It was amazing and wonderful. But I mean, I can gush about literally all of our guests. But yeah, that one was definitely a really cool highlight, just because I think, we're such intense, ravenous fans of some of the things that they worked on. I don't know. We've had so many friggin' rad guests that I just have been shocked, have been, not only willing but excited and to be on the podcast. It's just great. Like, I love having so many like new friends in the horror community. Some people that I have been able to spend some time with at things like StokerCon or things like that, or even just sending each other tweets on Twitter and sending each other stupid memes and stuff. It's great. I love it. I don't know. We're just privileged.
I think it would be remiss to talk about too our Hereditary episodes.
Oh
we
yeah,
got to talk to film creators of our favorite horror movie. That for me was one of those moments where it's like, whoa, we have something here. We aren't just shooting the shit, as they like to say. We had film creators on the show, and that was a real turning point for me for the show. That was awesome.
Yeah, it almost gave us permission to ask people to be on the show more, and yeah, again, like, most people say yes, or if they can't, then they're like super cool about it and are still a delight to interact with. So
yeah, thank you all. It's been a wonderful 5 years of Spook. Here's to 5 more. I have a beaker full of cinnamon whiskey that I will clink in the air for all who are listening.
Air clink. Should we switch gears to one of the truly great horror movies?
Yes. Before we dive too far into Rosemary and her baby,
Paramount Pictures presents Mia Farrow in a William Castle production, Rosemary's Baby. Co-starring John Cassavetes, Ruth Gordon, Sidney Blackmer, Morris Evans, and Ralph Bellamy. Written for the screen and directed by Roman Polanski. From the best-selling novel by Ira Levin. Suggested for mature audiences.
we definitely need to kind of address the elephant in the room when it comes to this film.
Yes.
And that elephant is named Roman Polanski.
And by elephant, we mean just nightmare douchebag monster.
Yeah, we do not support Roman Polanski in anything he does. He is a garbage man. And he is a garbage person.
We love and support the garbage collecting community.
Exactly.
Thank you for your service, but Roman Polanski, you suck.
You are a despicable human being.
You might have made a great movie, but you are a bad person, and hopefully history forgets you. But while remembering this great movie.
I can fully support and endorse the art that you have created and hold space to know that you are a monster. We are evolved human beings. We can hold two different opinions in the same hand.
And if it helps, I really do like that we can look at this and say, thankfully, film is this very collaborative art form. And so it's not just his art. In fact, it was many, many, many people's art. Whether that, be the grips who are, making sure that things are, where they need to be. So the sound and the lighting is working right, all the way to, the acting, the cinematographers, everything. So, hey, lots of really cool, or at least, decent or not horrifying people were also involved in this project. We appreciate their good work in making a great movie. Roman Polanski, you can suck it.
Yeah, you're a butthead. It is pretty interesting to me, though, that he was dating Sharon Tate, and she happened to be one of the sad victims of the Manson murders. That kind of blew my mind when I found that out.
Yeah, she was pregnant with his baby at the time.
Yeah.
Of being murdered.
It's one of those things that I knew, but then you just don't keep that in your wet reservoir of memories. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait, this was Manson. So, anyway, that is Max forgetting about cultural references.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, who wants to think about Roman Polanski?
Yeah, and Manson.
Oh, yeah. Another garbage human being. Oh.
Moving on from garbage human beings, let's talk about sweet little Mia Farrow and how she is a vision in this film.
Yes. So, I mean, Rosemary's Baby is just like a truly masterful film. Like the acting, the way that the script is put together,
the pacing, the art.
Yeah, just like it's so well constructed. The scares are there, but are the story does such a good job of kind of taking that very real, very visceral fear that one would feel in this kind of situation, and really making us experience what Rosemary experiences. It's just a truly masterful film in that way.
Yeah, it's a horror movie that has inspired countless of other horror stories, right? This is kind of your, to be reductive, it is a story about a woman who becomes isolated. The people around her become strangers, and she's pregnant, and she doesn't know what's going on. She's concerned about the baby's life. Overall, it's a fairly simple approach, but just the artwork that is given to us through Rosemary's Baby is a masterpiece. It's a work of horror art. And like I said at the beginning of our show, it's one of like my top 5 horror films, and I would love to kind of dive into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess my kind of initial thing that I want to kind of highlight, other than just, gushing about it in general, is that I think what makes this film work is that if like you said, it's kind of a simple concept, and it's not just that Rosemary's pregnant, it's that she's pregnant with the child of the devil, right?
But we don't know that though until the very, very end. Realistically, I mean,
yeah, it's
we know,
it's
but
played
we're not
with, it's hinted
to
at, it's that's the thing that we're afraid of. But yeah, that kind of story has been told, and often is told in a way that is just campy and ridiculous, and it like doesn't give the subject matter its due. And I think when the book was being adapted, I know that was a thing that a lot of people were concerned with, because the book does do a really good job of capturing this same kind of feel. Ira Levin, who wrote the book, I was reading somewhere that he definitely had some big concerns about, hey, are they gonna actually like treat this with respect? And that's what they did. They took a very serious approach to what could have been very campy, but instead, really kept it focused, realistic. It's about human emotion, right? It's about fear, it's about confusion, it's about being overwhelmed by pregnancy and by a relationship that seems to be going south, and all of these kinds of things. That's what made this work, is that it took the subject matter seriously rather than just making this be a campy horror film that, and not that that's inherently a bad thing, but that's what I think elevates it over a lot of other ones, is that it really, really gave us a very deep, realistic portrayal of this kind of idea.
Yeah, it's the reason I think why I gravitate to this film so much is inherently, I think it can be, there's two sides of it for me. As a queer individual, I see a lot of queer symbolism coming through. An individual who is suffering through something that no one else really understands, and other people are making decisions for that individual. Rosemary has very little autonomy in this film. And at the same time, the opposite of that, of course, is feminism. And I did read an article where it talked a lot about how Rosemary's Baby is all about abortion. That, we're all worried about the baby being the Antichrist, but in reality, it's talking about how Rosemary wants to make decisions for her baby, and she has all of these men who are telling her what to do and how to do it, and giving her things to do, and she really has very little control throughout the entire film.
Yeah. Well, and it's not even just the men, too. Like, it's even Minnie Castevet is also very much controlling her. It's basically everyone around her. This older generation is controlling her, as well as her husband, as well as the devil who raped her, and all of these different things. Like, these are all factoring in. So I like how complete of a picture it is. It's not just men control women. It's also that everyone can try to control and take away autonomy.
Yeah, and I think at the heart of it, it's about isolation.
Yes.
Where Rosemary is this beautiful individual who is creating life, and all of a sudden the people around her are strangers. And the fear that we have when we're going through hard things in our lives, what do we do when there's no one else there? What do we do when we are alone, when we don't know what we're doing, and when we feel like we can't do anything about that? And I really like what you said, Nathaniel, about how it takes all of this subject matter very seriously. The film was debuted in 1968. We're kind of on the cusp of the Satanic Panic. It would have been very easy for Polanski and his team to take this kind of demon idea and spin it in a caricature, can never say that word right,
Mm-hmm.
but really kind of make it tongue-in-cheek and silly. And I think about Evil Dead or Poltergeist, these excellent horror movies, but there is a level of cheese, there is a level of camp, and had that been present in Rosemary's Baby, I don't think it would be as permanent and long-lasting in our minds. It is hard to do Rosemary's Baby outside of this film. You can remake Evil Dead, and I love the remake, the remaster, whatever we want to call it. I have
Reboot.
not seen anything come close to the OG Rosemary's Baby. It is truly a classic.
Yeah, and later on I am going to briefly address the miniseries that was made. I'm not going to say good things about it. Spoiler.
I also, in that same vein, I really loved kind of the, Rosemary's married to an actor. This actor moves into this hoity-toity hotel with the Castavets, and things go down there. But it has this sense of like French fashion to it. Mm-hmm. It feels very Vogue, very highfalutin and fashionista. And it, I don't know, there's something about that feels sinister as well. That you have this kind of world of the upper echelon, and behind the scenes, they're all, demon worshippers and propagating rape. I feel like that's a very common theme that we see nowadays with life.
Yeah, and along those lines, I actually can highlight just something that's, now that we know what we know about Roman Polanski and being a bad person, I find it very, very interesting that one of the main kind of masterminds behind Rosemary's assault and, impregnation and all of that is in fact someone whose name is Roman in the movie.
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, what were you doing there, Roman? Were you confessing a little bit? Some of your id coming out?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Huh. Outside of that, I think the film is chock full of symbolism.
Yes.
And as a amateur demonologist, I love it. It reminds me a lot of Hereditary, where demonology is not about cloven hooves and sulfur. It's about that slow, manipulative, insidious, wow, I can't talk today, kind of horror. The pulling the strings, the deception, all of these kind of machinations going on behind the screen. That's what demonology and what our Judeo-Christian idea of demons should be. I think it's very poignant that roses were seen throughout the entire film. Roses are often a symbol of love and romance, but also purity, virginity, and kind of the ability to create. And so seeing those surrounded by Rosemary, who is of course name has rose within it, is also surrounded by this motif of innocence and virtue while she gets raped by the devil. There's kind of a sinister twist on the Immaculate Conception there.
Absolutely. And that's definitely on purpose, kind of showing this juxtaposition of those two things really makes it that much more horrific.
I think also for a film that was created in the 60s, a lot of times us nowadays, we think that old films aren't intense, or old films aren't scary, or they're not graphic enough. We have this kind of illusion that times were better back then, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of the more intense rape scenes that I've ever seen.
And this is rated approved. This is before the modern rating system, but it was rated approved, meaning literally, small children could have gone and seen this in theaters.
It kind of blows my mind a little bit, though, because everyone, will give Game of Thrones, let's say, a hard time because they tackle rape. There are, I can think of 2 or 3 rape scenes in that show. What I watched in Rosemary's Baby was much more graphic, much more illicit than anything Game of Thrones has done. And whether you agree or disagree with me there, that scene is hard. It's tough to watch.
Well, I think what makes it so effective is that it doesn't show us everything. it lets it certainly plays off of our imagination in a lot of ways. In a way that makes it more upsetting. It's the same kind of principle of not showing us the monster. It shows us enough to paint a really upsetting image in our own minds. Not that it holds back from what it does show us, but what it doesn't show us is even worse.
And really, this is the climactic moment of the horror for the movie.
For sure.
Before this and after this, there's not a lot. It's a tension build. It's not so much in-your-face horror.
Yeah, the remaining horror is the horror of being gaslit. Or gaslighted. Yes. Sorry, that's the actual past tense of that word. Which is a different kind of horror, for sure.
And I did appreciate kind of what they were alluding to within this scene of, a lot of the Satanists, the cult members. I don't want to call them Satanists because I fully support the Church of Satan. They were wearing Catholic robes. They looked like Catholic priests. Catholicism played a pretty heavy role in this film, not as a plot device, but as a way for this fiendish cult to mock kind of modern religion and how it can also be corrupt. And it brought up an interesting question that I want to pose to you, Nathaniel, being a believer and me not so much anymore. I think a lot of the horror that is portrayed here in Rosemary's Baby is this idea of we're going to take the Immaculate Conception and twist it on its head.
Yes.
And it just kind of got me thinking, the Immaculate Conception itself, did Mary consent to having the child of God? Is there doctrine or belief around that?
Yes.
Like, in theory, the Immaculate Conception, like, I understand that Gabriel came and talked to Mary and whatever. It just, you know what I'm trying to allude here?
Yeah, I think that was supposed to be basically where she agreed to that, was in her conversation with Gabriel beforehand.
And we don't have to get into that. I just thought it was curious that, Satan can do this, but God does it, but we give him a pass because maybe we had consent. I don't know. It's a different topic, different time.
Yes.
Anyway, I also thought what was pretty, I don't want to say liberal, that's not the right word, maybe progressive, was the suicide of Terry.
Yeah.
And how kind of visceral that was. That kind of set the scene for a lot of what was to come.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's one of those parts that I don't always remember is in the film until I watch it again and they go, oh, yeah. Oh,
same. I want to bang all of the old people's heads together because it was just like, oh, she was just on drugs, or, she was just too sad. She just should have worked. It's like, okay, boomers. Old boomers. Something else is going on.
I mean, this would be what, Greatest Generationers.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about Mia Farrow absolutely knocking out of the park, but I mean, these other actors, especially I think the Castevettes actors, Ruth Gordon and Sidney Blackmer, they also crushed it. I mean, Ruth Gordon got an Oscar for this movie.
Yeah, I mean,
Mia Farrow should have also gotten an Oscar. Let's be real. But
the Castevettes, though, were so sweetly innocent and nice that you just hated them.
Yep.
But they did it so well. It was impressive. And I think that brings us to another topic that we've alluded to a little bit. You and I love when horror movies take something wholesome and innocent and kind of twist it.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about like horror Christmas movies. This does something similar, but it takes things that are much more kind of personal to us. Spouses, elderly, doctors, friends, even our house, our apartment complexes. All of a sudden, we don't know who they are anymore. And how horrifying is that?
Yeah, that's what I love, is that with Rosemary, it literally strips away just every support system that she thinks she has. And, it takes every little piece away from her. which is really, really galling. Like, that is the horror of the, second half of this movie, is just watching how, the elderly confidants that are almost like surrogate parents or grandparents to her are terrible, and that's after her husband has become terrible. And then, her doctor, she can't even trust her doctor because he is also in on it. And her friends are being manipulated and she can't trust them. And even the place that she lives, there are secrets that she doesn't know about. The secret doors in the walls and things like that. All of that just like slowly strips away every support system, everything that she can trust, everything that she feels like she can rely on, and leaves her with nothing. That is truly harrowing. Very few movies give us that level of just deconstruction of everything that is in someone's life.
Well, and then also at the same time making us question, is she just crazy?
Yeah.
Everyone can't be against her. It's not everybody. It's everybody. Poor Mia Farrow, poor Rosemary. She had nobody.
Yeah, well, and what I like, too, is that, it's not just that, like, everyone is in on this. Because, like, some of the people, like, some of the friends, for example, aren't part of this cult or anything like that. But instead, they're getting manipulated by the people who are in the cult, who are in on it. And, they're more willing to believe, all of the, people who are against Rosemary, rather than Rosemary. It's easier to accept her being crazy than a conspiracy against her. And so even her friends ultimately turn against her because they're trying to do what they think is the best for her. And that is truly upsetting because, it's one thing to have your enemies against you. It's another thing to have your friends working against you, even though they still have good intentions. Oh, it's so sinister. It's so sinister.
And that is the horror of this film. We're going to talk about our screams later on, and while it might not be that gory decapitation that we love to see in Hereditary, there is something else that gets under your skin and follows you around the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
I love movies that stick to me after I finish watching them, and Rosemary Baby is just one of those masterpieces that does that. You talked a little bit about gaslighting earlier, Nathaniel. Anything else you want to kind of say about that? We touched about that just now.
I mean, I'll just say that I feel like a lot of times, gaslighting comes up in a lot of films, but like it's rarely done with this level of clever subtlety. Like, this is a masterclass on how to write gaslighting. And I just wish other things could approach it with that level of tact, because so often it just feels so ham-fisted. It's just someone going, "Oh, I took my pills this morning. No, you didn't. No, you didn't." It's usually that obvious. But with this, it's just like, oh, every little thing is just slowly breaking down all of her self-belief.
Yeah, I think gaslighting is kind of a trigger word right now. A lot of people use this term to describe what is going on in their life, and I don't think a lot of us really understand what gaslighting is and how terrible it is. If you want a prime example of what true gaslighting is like, watch Rosemary's Baby.
Yep.
I also think a lot of the horror portrayed is just how he treated women in the 60s.
Yeah.
Like, her husband, she just gets raped by the devil. She wakes up, she's very groggy, doesn't know where she is or what's going on. And her and Roman had talked about having sex the night before. And he's just like, yeah, you passed out. And
You mean Guy?
Guy, I'm sorry. Yeah, we had sex. It was like having sex with a corpse. It was great for me. Kind of a yuck. And then moving on. And it's like, wait, what? We're not going to talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah. And another great example of just how messed up it was. Just looking at how, when Rosemary finally escapes and gets to another doctor, what do? They call her husband and they call her doctor, who are both in on the conspiracy. Regardless of her saying, do not contact them, they are trying to, take my baby. Like, there is something sinister. They give her exactly no bearing whatsoever and immediately contact the people that she begs them not to.
Yeah.
Medical professionals who aren't even, say, oh, hey, well, like, can we talk about this and make sure that this is coming from a place of reality? No, they just assume immediately, oh, well, if she's saying her husband is bad, then she's obviously the one who is at fault here.
Yeah, and it's not, again, she doesn't have the autonomy in this situation at all.
Yep.
It is, oh, well, she's just pregnant, and pregnant people are just crazy.
Yep, it's just female hysteria, no big deal.
It's gross.
Mm-hmm.
It's gross. People, don't do this. It's terrible.
Yeah, that's the upsetting thing, is not just that this happens to this fictional character, but how close this was to the lived experience to so many real women around this time period.
Yeah.
Obviously not to this degree, I hope, I pray, but, the fact that, there are parts of this that were just the everyday life of so many people is so sickening.
I was reading an article a few days ago about a group of women who went to the same OBGYN, and when they were pregnant, they were getting pap smears and, of course, doing all of the pregnancy exams that are required, and the doctor definitely sexually molested them, several of them, hundreds of them. And today the state announced that it was all just part of their medical care. And so if we think these problems, these issues are resolved, they're not.
Nope. Also comes to mind the doctor who just, he was supposed to be inseminating women with, either a donor embryo or, a husband's embryo, or, sorry, sperm, not embryos. Clearly I'm tired. No, so, so artificial insemination, and yeah, he just was using his own, and, just suddenly, technically has just hundreds of children all over. Things like that just show us, hey, things have gotten better, but not as much better as we would like it to.
It's rough out there.
Yep.
Especially with our lovely country's legislation on women's bodies. But again, another time, another place, we support you, ladies.
Yep.
I think another aspect that I really love about Rosemary's Baby is the pacing. So many times I feel like the pacing of horror ruins films. It is the Achilles heel. And Rosemary Baby, it might be a little hard for new watchers to kind of get through, but the subtle clues and the tension building really keep you engaged. It's about a 2-hour film, but you are on the edge of your seat. You're wanting to know what's going on. You're wanting to know what's happening. There's never really a moment where you're going to look at your watch, I don't feel.
Yeah, it's, even though it does have, much more 1960s, 1970s kind of pacing, it's so tense you kind of just don't care.
Yeah, and what comes
viewer
to mind is the Scrabble scene where she's trying to figure out that Roman Castevet is an anagram for this old-timey devil worshiper, and the Scrabble pieces fall on the floor, and she's trying to figure it out and taking her time, and the camera just sits there, and it sits there a little bit more, and she's playing around with the Scrabble tiles, and then she figures it out. Like, it just lets that scene breathe. That's realism. That's what we would really do. We're not gonna drop a bunch of Scrabble tiles and be like, "Oh, this spells the devil is here."
Yeah, it's not a wave of a wand and suddenly it's Tom Marfolo Riddle becomes I am Lord Voldemort. It's a little more complicated than that.
A little bit. It lets realism take place. Like we've said, it takes this stuff seriously.
Yeah. Should we talk about the ending?
Oh my gosh. Nathaniel, the ending is the chef's kiss of this entire film.
Yes.
The way... So Rosemary, of course, has her baby. The cult takes it away. They convince her that it was a miscarriage or stillborn, whatever we want to classify it as. She hears the baby, and this is the big reveal. She enters the room, and there's this upside-down crucifix over this black baby's cradle. Little on the nose, Polanski.
Mm-hmm.
But she's horrified. Of course she's horrified. Everyone is cheering. They're celebrating. Again, they're gaslighting her like, oh, she should be so proud. She's the mom. You know, all of this kind of weird mind fuckery. And then Rosemary loves her baby.
Mm-hmm.
The very end of the scene, she looks at little baby Antichrist and she loves it. She starts to cradle it and hold it in her arms, and everyone watching is just like, wait, what? No. Wait, what? No. And it's perfect. It's so good.
Oh yeah, like you just feel it's this perfect combination of surprising but inevitable, right? Because she spends the whole movie fighting for her baby. So, of course, she loves her baby even after everything. But you just feel the bottom of your stomach drop out. And you just go, "Oh, no."
It's that perfect scenario. I love it. I love it when horror films don't give you a happy ending.
Mm-hmm.
Because life doesn't have happy endings sometimes. And so this is a prime example of just being disappointed. Rosemary couldn't overcome this cult. They got her. And it's tragic. And I'm getting a little emotional thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because it's just this final exhalation of, well, damn, we didn't win this time. It's good.
It's so good.
I love this movie.
Yeah, there's basically no cons. It's really, really freaking good.
We have to put a con because we're critics.
Yeah.
The pacing, again, if you're new to horror and you don't appreciate old cinema, it might be hard to get through. Like, it's an older film, sure, whatever, and that might be distasteful, I guess, to new viewers. If you don't appreciate this film, you're dumb. Do you have any cons, Nathaniel, for the film?
I honestly can't think of anything. Yeah, like, maybe, there's a couple scenes that might be slightly too slow, but it's negligible, honestly. Like, it's a really freaking great movie. Yeah, it's just so good. Should we talk scores?
Absolutely. My scores have changed throughout the course of this discussion, and
Same.
I think this is the second time where we have mirroring scores, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I gave it a 5 for screams. It's not overly in your face. I didn't want it to be overly in my face, but the horror elements, the tension building, the slow burn, and then that final last scene really just, I gave it a 5.
Yeah, I give it a 5. It's like one of those movies that I'm on the edge of my seat while I'm watching it, but I'm not scared, but then it just unsettles me for the rest of the day. And that is effective scary, even if it's not, oh my gosh, I'm terrified while I'm watching this movie. Moving on to Crowns, I give this movie a 9. Really just because even though I think this movie is a masterpiece, the only reason it's really not a 10 is that it's kind of a hard movie to watch, like in a way that makes me hesitant to rewatch it sometimes. Like when I do, I just like revel in how incredible it is, but I don't know. It's just it's an experience that I don't necessarily want to put myself through very regularly.
Yeah, I agree. I gave it a 9 for a few different reasons. I adore this film. It is a masterpiece in my mind. Similar to what you said, it is a little bit hard to rewatch, and you do kind of have to mentally prep for this film.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a film. I mean, you have to do that with Hereditary. You have to do that with a lot of horror that we love. But the topics that are discussed in Rosemary's Baby stick to you, and they stick to you so heavily that you kind of avoid this film. You can't. It doesn't have a ton of rewatchability.
Yeah.
And that's not a disservice to it. I think that actually like gives it a lot of cred.
Yeah.
But there is something that is just missing that I still have not given my 10.
Yeah, there's just, I don't know, maybe it's just the fact that Roman Polanski made it.
There we go. Let's throw that there.
Freaking Roman Polanski. Okay. So do you want to hear my thoughts about the novel / the sequel novel / the very bad miniseries?
Yeah, I watched, I think, half of the miniseries, and if we have to play Smash or Pass, all I'm saying is hard pass.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so miniseries came out, what year was that? I watched it on Hulu, so I mean it can't have been that long ago. 2014.
I want to say, yeah, it was fairly recent.
Yeah. So it was a 2-part miniseries. Both parts, I guess, aired on Mother's Day. It had Zoe Saldana as Rosemary. It was just really weird and kind of flat. For some reason, they changed the location to like Paris because I guess they really felt like going to Paris. I don't know. There's just like a lot of details that didn't make any sense. They made it in a more modern era, but a lot of things just didn't really add up. It just, I don't know. It wasn't very good. Don't recommend watching it, and I think that's kind of the universal opinion of it. And yeah, like, just if you're gonna watch Rosemary's Baby, watch the movie. Like, don't watch one that everyone's kind of phoning it in because I think they just know that they're not gonna make anything near as good as the movie.
It was, I think, not to give it a pass or anything like that, but it was during a time where we were remaking a lot of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was getting a reboot or a remaster, and things still are, but I think we've kind of figured out the formula a little bit better. Like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel to make it a remaster.
Yeah, well, and it didn't add anything new to the conversation. I think that's the problem. Yeah. Is that, like...
and what it did add, it was superfluous.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we have a great story with Rosemary's Baby. We don't need it changed or shifted or different.
Yes, exactly. So, okay, so the novel, switching gears to that. The novel is really good. So it's, like I mentioned earlier, it's by Ira Levin. He is a pretty skilled writer. I quite like a lot of what I've read by him. So he also famously wrote The Stepford Wives, The Boys from Brazil, I Guess Before Dying. He wrote the play Death Trap, which is a really fun one. Overall a pretty talented suspense writer. With dipping his toe in horror now and again. It's solid. Like if you like the movie, you'll like the book. I would say it's one of those books that was adapted in a way that is, pretty much just about as faithful and as solid as an adaptation as you could want. The movie maybe edges it out a little bit just because it's just so well delivered in terms of like the performances. But yeah, like it's a great book. Unfortunately, though, that book has a sequel called Son of Rosemary that was written 30 years later, and it basically is just like, oh hey, in 1999, Rosemary wakes up after being in a coma since 1973.
What?
Yeah, that's how it starts. And so now her son, whose name is Andy for some reason, is a leader of some like big international like charity, and definitely there's secretly, so he's like trying to allegedly be good and achieve world peace, and oh no, I got away from the cult, and they, I'm thwarting their plans for me to be the Antichrist, and then of course everything falls apart, and Satan shows up and drags Rosemary to hell, and then suddenly Rosemary wakes up in a cold sweat, and it's back in the before she's even ever pregnant, and it was all just a dream that just that maybe is warning her about some bad things maybe happening in the future. The end. So
no.
So screw that book. It's stupid.
I hate that.
Yeah, no, everyone hated it. It is just the worst.
I hate that. That like made me mad. I feel tension in my body.
Yeah, so even though I gave Ira Levin some good compliments, he definitely was making a quick cash grab that just was dumb for Son of Rosemary. He clearly phoned that in. But yeah.
Well, let's talk about now how we are staying spooky.
Yeah, how are you staying spooky?
Two things. I recently bought the PS5 version for Last of Us.
Ooh.
I have never played this game before. I have tried it a lot. I get to the scene where the main character's daughter dies right off in the beginning, and I'm like, nope, too close to home, pass. But HBO is doing a television show of this, which I'm quite excited for, and my partner loves this game so much that I finally got through that first moment, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I don't do well with adventure shooter games. I get kind of bored with the mechanics. I need magic and swords to keep my attention.
Mm-hmm.
But so far, I really like it. They've done a lot of accessibility updates for people who don't like shooting games. Like, if I crouch, I turn invisible, and I don't have to worry so much about sneaking. And whenever I aim my gun, time slows down, which is good. Probably not the right way to play it, but I don't care.
Hey, I mean, if you get to experience the story at least, like that's something. Because that game is phenomenal. But also brutally hard. I love it. In fact, I'm actually playing Last of Us Part 2 in addition to some other games right now. And that one isn't speaking to me quite in the same way, but it's still really freaking good. So yeah, Last of Us. Awesome. I'm glad that you're playing it, even though it is not at all a game that I would have pinned you to play.
Yeah, I will play it for about 30 minutes to an hour, and then I shift over to like Skyrim or Elden Ring or one of my other fantasy games.
That tracks.
But also, Mark and I went and saw Pearl while we were in Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
It might be my first 10.
Interesting.
This film blew my socks off. It's very similar and akin to Rosemary's Baby, where the premise is incredibly simple, but the cinematography, the acting, and just kind of the horror and tension that builds through the entire show to this, like, the scariest part is the credits, like the credit roll. There's a scene that they are played on top of that just, it's a work of art. So good. So good.
Well, I need to see it.
I want to talk to you about it so bad, but you do need to watch X first. I think X is less good, but it gives you a lot of context about who this character is and what eventually happens with them.
Okay.
So it kind of, I don't think it's a 10 because of that failure. Does that make sense? Like, you need to know before you understand.
Okay.
So, anyway, throwing that out there. Pearl, fantastic. We also saw Barbarian while we were in Disneyland, and I also have a lot of feelings about that one. Another episode.
Okay. Good to know. So I've been staying spooky mostly with a lot of literature lately. So spooky might not be the right word for this first thing, but Stephen King just dropped a new book called Fairy Tale. And at least nothing spooky has happened in it yet, to the point that I'm at. I'm about a fifth of the way through the book. But even though not that much has happened, it's very good, and I like it a lot. So I'm very excited to see where it goes. Another book I read recently, I actually listened to it on audiobook, is a book called Just Like Mother. Though not perfect, it was a lot of fun. It was very creepy. I'll just say it's a book that involves cult background and a lot of weird robotic baby dolls, and leave it at that. If those two things sound interesting to you, maybe give that a listen or a read.
Yeah, that is a
weird teaser, I know.
Yeah, but I kind of love it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I would say that there are some things that I definitely have some qualms about, but as a whole, it was a fun read. It was pretty tense, and as a whole, I think a lot of our listeners might quite enjoy the read. Okay, well, I guess we should wrap things up.
Yes, thank you everyone again. It's been a wonderful 5 spooky-tastic years. We will be around for probably another 5 years. I wonder what horror we'll be talking about in 5 years.
I'm so excited to find out.
The remake of Ferngully. That's my guess.
Yes. Hexus will really, really terrify.
Oh, Hexus is spooky.
Indeed.
All right, everyone. Stay spooky.
Stay spooky.
Need even more Scream Kings? Here's our obligatory shameless social media plug. Follow us on Twitter or Instagram at ScreamKingsPod. You could also email us at screamkingspodcast@gmail.com. Help us reach a wider audience of horror fans by leaving a review on iTunes or by sharing a link on social media. You can also support the show by going to patreon.com/ScreamKings. Stay spooky.